So when we wish other beings to be free of suffering, it allows us to be with them when they're suffering. When we know our own reactions to other people's suffering, we'll be able to tolerate a lot of things much more effectively. We probably won't need to placate them so much and tell them, oh, it's okay, everything will be okay. We won't probably need to come up with our own story when we're listening to them about our suffering or the suffering of somebody we know that's similar to theirs. Very importantly, we won't need to blame them or ourselves or others for their experience. We also won't need to distract them from their suffering or distract ourselves from the suffering of others. We'll be able to be present with others in their suffering, in their fear, in their problems, which means that we won't be so reactive to people's problems and suffering. And the truth is, I think this is one reason why we can be around each other, not just in the good times, but to support and encourage one another when we're having a bad time. And I would say the epitome of developing compassion would be to tell ourselves, if anybody ever needs a friend, may I be that friend. And may I be a good friend to them. And in this way, then we become fearless. We're not so afraid to get involved with others. We'll feel freedom to be generous with our time, with our resources, with our kindness, with our generosity towards others. And if we're Dharma practitioners, we might know of some things to say or points of view to encourage them, to uplift them. A lot of people don't need us to solve their problems. So with compassion, as one of my teachers said, one of the things we can do is respect people enough to let them have their problems and be a good friend to them, rather than try to solve their problems or run away from them. So I encourage you to practice. Now, what happens when we practice like this, when we begin to see the suffering of others, we can't help but be moved to do something about it. And when that happens, we might realize that there's not a lot that we can do. But that doesn't mean that these prayers and these practices have no purpose. Because in doing them, what we're developing is our own capacity to develop these qualities. We are, in practicing this way, working towards becoming the type of being that will eventually help people correctly and skillfully, and maybe even once and for all, because we'll be able to guide them out of their ignorance, out of their darkness, out of their confusion. So just because you can't help somebody, because you're practicing compassion, is no reason to think that these practices are meaningless. We might not see the result of our patience and compassion immediately, but think that down the line, maybe even down in time that we cannot see, or in space that we cannot see, there will be a result. That is a law. Everything we think, everything we do, and everything we say will have an impact on ourselves and others. And this is why these practices work. And we will be able to see that our suffering and the suffering of others is based on something deep in the root of our mind called not knowing, called ignorance. So these practices help us to overcome that ignorance, and in turn will help others to overcome theirs. And this is what is called true compassion, we can say. Not just to feel pity for somebody or to help them temporarily, but to have the aspiration to help them forever. Come what may, with equanimity and with loving kindness.